All right, so thank you again, everyone, for being here. My name is Annalise Loffer. I work for Dornsife First Year Advising, and I'm part of the First Year Experience team. And we're very excited today to be partnering with the Core Check Center to help give you some tips for how to manage midterms, how to be most successful academically, how to manage kind of those academic anxieties, and lots of other really important skills to help maximize your potential and really, achieve what you want to academically here at USC. So we're going to briefly go over some academic resources that we think all students need to be familiar with, and then I'll go ahead and introduce Nicolette, who will give us some strategies to thrive. And then we'll go over some words and wisdom from some of our current students, and then talk a little bit about reflection and goal setting. And then we'll have time for some questions at the end. So academic resources on campus. You may be familiar with these, you may not. But these are some of those supports that are going to, really help you be the most successful in your classes. First being your professors and your TAs via office hours. Supplemental instruction, which does kind of drop in sessions where they review the material from your classes. This is very common for those STEM courses, like the bio, the chemistry, the math, and physics. And it's kind of like an extra discussion session, just specifically to help you work through problems, practice problems, prepare for exams, etc. There's also the Math Center, where you can go and work on your homework or ask questions of TAs for your math classes. It's both virtual and in person in Caprillion Hall. And there's always TAs on duty who can help answer any questions that you have as you're doing your homework for the week or prepping for exams. The Writing Center is an awesome resource for any of those Writing 150 papers, GE papers, or just other writing assignments. They'll do even things like resumes and cover letters. And you can book appointments up to once a week to have your writing, whether that's for a class or for something personal, be reviewed by a writing coach. So it's a really great resource for any type of written project or assignment. Dornsife Tutoring does tutoring appointments for specific classes, like, again, some of the language, some of the STEM coursework, some of those big, very common classes. You can book tutoring appointments with a tutor and go over the questions that you have. And you can get up to 1 hour of tutoring per class per week through this service. And it's free, paid for by Dornsife. The Economics Tutoring Center also does tutoring specifically for economics classes. So if any of you are in majors where you're taking econ, it's a great resource. The Language Center can be helpful if you do have any questions about your language classes, whether you're wondering if you're in the right placement or not. And then the Core Check Center, who we're going to hear a lot about their resources in a little bit. But what I love about the Core Check Center is that they're not going to necessarily teach you, Spanish or teach you math, but they're going to give you lots of tools and resources to help you be most successful in those classes. And so they're really applicable to any class that you might be taking. Also want to just go over some academic adjacent resources. So these are not necessarily strictly related to your academics, but as we know, your health and well-being is integrally tied to how you can do academically. And so there are these Health Thrive workshops that are put on by Student Health and Counseling and Mental Health, and you can register. They do all kinds of things from getting good sleep, to managing stress and anxiety, to more niche kind of groups, but they have all kinds of different workshops throughout the semester. And then lastly, a plug for student equity and inclusion programs. I've listed the ones that fall under this office here, but these are great resources not only for social support if you find yourself identifying with any of these groups, but a lot of them have spaces on campus where you can just go and have a quiet, happy, like a quiet, safe place to study with other people, like-minded folks who also maybe share some of the identities that you do. So a really great resource, not only for the social and community and connectedness component, but also can be a great place to relax and to do that studying and to get some quiet work done in a place that feels safe as well. So those are some of the academic resources that we want to make sure you're familiar with. But now we're going to dive into the meat of this presentation. So I'd like to introduce Nicolette Smith, who's from Cortex Center and is going to lead us through a whole bunch of information on study strategies, stress management, and balancing your work, your school, and your life. So I'll pass it off to Nicolette.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I couldn't unmute myself and have the remote control, so I'm gonna re-request it. But hi everyone. Again, I'm Nicolette and I work as a learning specialist at the Cortex Center. I'm not sure how much you know about the center itself, so hopefully I'll be able to share you what we do today, but as well as just kind of give you some tools and resources that you can utilize in your time here at USC. And really, I want you to think of this presentation as a toolkit in the sense that, some things may work better for you than other things. And so just use this to really, I guess, explore what things I have today and then take the things that you think would work best for you. All right, so we're going to do a quick introduction and then get into stress management, time management, and then study strategies. And then at the end, I'll share some resources to the Cortex Center. But let's go ahead and get started with this creativity activity. And hopefully you all are at least able to use the chat. So go ahead and just take a moment. And think about, what do you think this abstract shape is? There is no right or wrong answer to this, but this is really more to get, your creative juices flowing. So take a moment, and then when you feel ready, you can go ahead and just put it in the chat. Feel also free to unmute if you want to. Any ideas? All right, I'm seeing some things come in the chat. Thank you all so much for participating. I appreciate it. So I see mushrooms, yes, grass, trees, leaves, nice. On the topic of grass, sometimes students will be like, "Oh, it looks like a golf course," for the students that play golf. And I personally don't play golf, but I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can see how you would think that." Foresty vibes, yes, love it. If you're still thinking, feel free to put it in the chat. But really, I just want to share this creativity activity. It's really short, but I think it's a great introduction because the Cortex Center its mission is to help students achieve their academic and creative potential. And really, yes, creativity, it is in the sense of like the arts, but also just being creative in the way that we approach school and approach what works for you individually in terms of like the time management study strategies. I said at the beginning, like take what works for you. And so at the Cortex Center, we really want to support students in your journey at USC in the classroom, but then also as a whole person. We understand that you are not just students, right? You're not just robots that go to class and do homework all day, but you have lives outside of class, and that can affect your performance in class. So we want to make sure that we support you on both ends, whether it be that the building your academic skills or, the self-care, stress management, wellness piece that may come up, you know, throughout the semester. So thank you all for participating in the chat. I appreciate it. This next slide, I'm not going to have anybody share since it's a little bit more personal, but I did want to do a check-in kind of along the lines of stress management. Um, and really just thinking about, how are you doing right now? I know it's like the fourth or fifth semester. Okay, there we go. Or not semester, sorry, fourth or fifth week in the semester. So thinking again, you can just keep it to yourself, no pressure to share, but thinking about your stress level, 1 being couldn't be better, I'm doing great, or 10 being yikes, like this is too much. Think about where you're at, and just kind of take a moment to reflect. All right. And hopefully, as you're reflecting, you can kind of just think about the Cortex Center as a resource again for stress management. Um, it's important here because we see stress does impact performance, and in this case, academic performance. Not all stress is bad, right? There is a good amount of stress where you're like, you have that thought in the back of your head that's like, oh, maybe I should get started on my paper that's due next week, right? Like that may be a good level of stress. And that helps you, as this graph shows, be alert, focused, motivated to get things done. But where we don't want you is in that high level of stress where you're just so overcome with anxiety, you know, um, feeling stressed out that you actually lose focus or maybe procrastinate even because you feel so overwhelmed. That definitely will decrease your academic performance. And so part of what we do again, and what I'll be sharing is to help mitigate that stress. So again, college, there is going to be stress, but we don't want it ever to get to that level. Or when it does get to that level, we want to make sure that you're equipped with the strategies to overcome it and get back down to the optimal or low stress levels. So, a question you can take a moment to think about is what stressors are you either currently experiencing or anticipate experiencing? Um, and this could range because we all have different experiences as people and then as students, different majors, different class schedules and things like that. But if anybody is willing, please feel free to share any stressors you're either currently experiencing or anticipate experiencing in the chat. I'll give maybe like a minute or two for response. As we're waiting, I know sometimes students, like a big one, I think that has come up recently that I've heard students talk about is feeling homesick, which I know even if some students may be in their second semester at USC, they might be surprised, like, oh, I had a semester to adjust. But actually, going home from the holidays and then coming back, especially if you live out of state, can definitely be something that is something that you have to, I guess, constantly deal with. And I think, that might still happen over time. So definitely making sure we mitigate stress in that area. Another area, of course, is just like class load, course schedule, especially as you get further into your major, the rigor might increase. And honestly, USC is just has academic rigor from the very beginning. Those RIT 150 classes, I know. Uh, so that's just something else that students definitely go through. And then I think, just the kind of along the sense of belonging, right? Transitioning into USC, a new campus, new friends, still finding your way about even thinking career-wise what you want to do, but even, what kind of person do you want to become. So I didn't see anything put in the chat, but those are just some stressors that I've seen personally as a learning specialist and then also have experienced as a college student myself back in the day. All right. So one thing I did want to just share kind of as a framework for experience when we experience stress is just to foster self-compassion and really give yourself grace as you transition into USC. And um, students who go to USC, it was not easy to get in, right? It's very competitive and USC admits students of high caliber. And so along with, being students of high caliber, you have high expectations for yourself. And so it's important to know that mistakes will happen and are going to happen and they're okay, right? So give yourself grace. Try not to beat yourself up too much. Um, Comparison can definitely get to students, but one suggestion, I love this quotation because it just says it perfectly by Brene Brown, is talk to yourself like you would talk to someone you love, right? So in my case, I picture my little cousin, and it's like, what if my little cousin made a mistake? How would I be speaking to her? And that kind of can help shift my mind to being like, okay, well, are the thoughts or things that I'm telling myself in the moment, giving myself grace? And so that's like a good marker if you struggle with that. Um, so kind of from that framework of giving yourself self-compassion, here are more tangible tips for stress management. So the first one is invest in your health. And I know that might be a little bit cliche or just like, make sure you're staying healthy, but really college, you can become unhealthy really quickly, especially with like the stress, right? Lack of sleep for XYZ reasons. Food, getting accustomed to having to, yes, maybe you have a dining hall where things are provided, but having to like navigate that as well. So just some suggestions, movement breaks when studying. Get up out of your chair. Don't sit down for 8 hours straight. Um, Make sure that you're giving yourself those breaks and you're standing up and walking around. Sleep is a really big one that I think is the first to go anytime students get stressed. They think, oh, I need to pull all-nighters or, 5 hours of sleep is going to get me through. And there, we don't recommend overnight or all-nighters or 5 hours of sleep. Sometimes that might happen because of midterms, but that's not something that you really want to be doing on a weekly basis. So try to get enough sleep and make it a priority because even if you get even if you have a shorter amount to study because you're sleeping an hour more, that shorter amount might be more effective than if you had foregone sleep and then you're just trying to study, and not really able to pay attention, focus, or remember things. And then the last thing is treat yourself to some self-care. So this could be something as simple as like, oh, I'm gonna go get a Starbucks, or oh, hey, I'm gonna go and meet up with a friend and go on a walk or something like that. But having those small moments to look forward to can help with motivation and also just help with your overall well-being. And along those lines of well-being, just really taking a mindful moment to kind of just be present. A lot of times you're like, oh no, I have to do this. This assignment is due. Like, I already have to be applying for internships in the summer and it's like 6 months away and things like that. And all of those things are important, but really taking a moment to just be present. So that could be taking a moment to color, draw, be creative in some way. It could even be going outside to observe nature and your surroundings. I know we're in a city and but USC has a beautiful campus, and we're actually right across from the Rose Garden, kind of like near the Coliseum. So that's like a really quick way to, of course, when it's not raining, but a really quick way to get in touch with nature and kind of decompress away from USC, even though it's like right across the street. But I've done it myself, and I find that it's really refreshing, even taking those 15 minutes. And then the last one is just building connection with others, whether that be people from back home, your family, loved ones that aren't necessarily with you on campus. But it could also mean, reaching out to a roommate or somebody on your floor or, somebody in class as well and building those connections. Um, and getting involved on campus, I think, is a great way because there's so many clubs for everything that you want to do. So that's a great way to meet like-minded people as well. Um, I just encourage students, I understand like I'm an introvert, and so I don't necessarily like to, or I'm not necessarily somebody who will go out of my way to talk to new people, but that 1 hour of maybe like feeling a little uncomfortable going to a club meeting can lead to hours and hours and hours of new friendships. And so just kind of think of it that way, if you have a hard time putting yourself out there. And then lastly, of course, don't be afraid to seek professional help for additional care and support. You have your wonderful advisors, of course, as first contact. The Cortex Center is also a great resource, but USC has a lot of other resources. If you're overwhelmed, you can always go to your advisors, come to the Cortex Center, and definitely if we are not able to offer the care or support that you necessarily need, we will make sure that you get in touch with those that do. So that's kind of concluding the stress management portion. And I did put this first just because, yes, I want to share like the study skills and things like that that are so important, but it's really hard to be a great student if you're not taking care of yourself as a person. And so that's why I put this first. And I want to be really intentional about sharing that because I think a lot of times it may be flipped in the messaging that we receive. So just really keep that in mind. But moving on into time management, does anybody have any idea what this number means? 168. You can go ahead and like put it in the chat any ideas or guesses? And it's okay if you're wrong too, but this is just more for fun. Any idea about what this number could potentially mean as it relates to time? Okay, I don't see any guesses. I'll wait a few more seconds and then I can share what it does mean. 1 week, 6 days, 8 hours. Oh, okay, I like that. I never thought about that. I really like that way of thinking. So it's actually not broken down into that. 168 actually refers to the number of hours in a week, but I've never gotten that response before. So I really love the way that you're thinking about that as well. But 168 is actually the number of hours we have in a week. And I don't know if you've seen that quotation, but it's like we all have the same number of hours a week as Beyonce. That's actually true. And right. And so we want to manage that time as best we can, even if we may not be at that level yet. Um, but right now, again, this is more for self-evaluation. You don't need to put it in chat, but think about how do you feel about your time management skills? One, being dissatisfied, and then five, being they're great. And I'm sure, as USC students, you have some level of time management. And so really it's more about like adjusting semester to semester, even our times of the year where we may have more things going on in our personal life or maybe a heavier course load. And so that's where the core check center comes in because again, we understand that coming into USC, you all are somewhat or have somewhat of a understanding of time management. And so we really want to just be there to offer different resources or things that may be useful as USC students throughout your journey. And that first resource is our semester calendar. And so this is a sample from 2023, but the semester calendar is great because it's just a snapshot of everything you have going on in the semester. So we have a blank kind of template. And then what we recommend students, we also have paper copies as well, or you can print out the digital copy, but basically color coding each class you have and then up front writing in all the assignments. So literally just choosing a class, looking at the syllabus, and you're writing the major assignments for the whole semester. And you do that for each class at the beginning of the semester. And yes, it does take time, but then it also saves time because a lot of times when I'm working with students, I'll be like, oh, like, when is this test? And they're like, I don't know. Let me log into Blackboard. And so doing that for every assignment can get tedious. And so this is a great way just to see everything in one snapshot. And I don't know if any of you use like weekly planners, and I think those are great. But the one thing about weekly planners is like you might have a week that's completely slammed, right? Around midterms. You have 3 tests, 2 papers due, and you might not really even realize that you have that much going on until you get to that week, right? You flip over the page and it's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so that's why it's super important to have a semester calendar just so you can plan ahead. The weeks that are a little bit more free, you're able to use that time to work on things that when it comes to that packed week, you're getting a head start. We also recommend putting personal life events on the calendar. So, for example, if it's your birthday, I just had a student, it's her birthday this week. And so I was like, are you going to do anything, that weekend related to school? Or do you want to do anything related to school this weekend? And of course, she said no. So, putting stuff like that in is recommended just so you know, hey, if I'm not going to do anything this weekend, let me plan ahead, right? And it also helps with the feeling guilty. A lot of students are like, I should be studying, right? But you don't want to be like at a concert or at a dinner and be like, I should be studying. So this is also a way to give yourself a peace of mind to be like, you know what, I already have it planned it out. I can enjoy myself and be present when I'm, having my self-care or fun activities, and then knowing that I have time scheduled out to study. We also have this weekly calendar, and this is more just to build a routine, especially when you come to college. It's like, well, I don't have to wake up until 10 minutes before my class starts. Let me roll out of bed, brush my teeth, and head along my way, right? But actually, building a calendar is really great because number one, you want to have a consistent sleep schedule, right? Which often means you're going to bed and waking up around the same time every day, or at least, 4 to 5 days out of the week. But also having this weekly calendar helps to pinpoint those spots where, for example, if you look at this one on Monday from 12 to 1, that's a good amount of time in between classes where you could potentially be working on homework. You could potentially, be applying to jobs or scholarships or internships. But this really helps to create those daily and weekly routines. And it also just lessens the load on your brain to be like, what should I be doing next, right? Nobody is telling you what to do, so maybe I can just, sit on my phone. But actually, if you're able to create these productive routines and know, okay, this is what I'm going to do at this time. These are what my Mondays look like. These are what my Tuesdays look like. You'll be more productive with your time, and then overall, you'll have a lot more time to devote to, the fun activities or things you like to do on the side outside of school. And then this last resource is an action plan. And this is really for when you have an overload of assignments, within a short amount of time around midterms, finals, or maybe you're even need to catch up for another reason. Um, but what we suggest here is again, we just have a template. You have the amount of time on the top, and then you just write down your different classes. And then what you can do is break down large tasks into manageable pieces. So if we look, for example, at the CTCS 473, you can see that this would be like a video maybe due. So you're not just writing in, oh, video due on this date, but you're actually breaking down, okay, what do I need to do to be able to submit this video on time? So you can see the first step is just find footage, write script, record narration. And then the next day it's edit in the labs. And then the next day after that is finish edit. And so by breaking down these tasks into manageable pieces, it helps with procrastination because you feel accomplished and it's like, okay, I can do this one thing today. So it helps with procrastination, but then it also just helps out and prioritize what you need to do each day versus just feeling overwhelmed. And again, USC is very rigorous. And so a lot of times you're getting these longer papers, right? 5 to 10 pages. You have these long midterms. And so it's great for stress when you're able to break down these tasks. It's great for procrastination. And then you're also just able to get ahead. And so overall, your performance will be better if you start studying, a week out as opposed to 2 days before the actual exam. Um, and then just some other things that I wanted to go through is just a lot of times students struggle with estimating time. So they'll be like, oh, I can get this done in an hour. And really it takes them 3 hours. And that's okay. Like it's okay if it takes you longer than you think. But I think the issue is when you're up running close to a deadline. And so you thought you were going to be able to get this done and now it's taking you longer and it's due at midnight. So a suggestion is just building buffer time into your schedule. Also scheduling less back-to-back meetings, right? Travel time, USC is a big campus, so not expecting, that you'll be able, unless you have a scooter, that you're not able to get from place to place in like 5 minutes, right? Um, and then just consider what you can eliminate, delegate, and reprioritize. Like, do I really need to do this? No, maybe I don't. Eliminate it. Delegate. Okay, like for example, I need to buy groceries. Am I able to delegate that either through like getting delivery or, doing the Target pickup so at least I'm saving time like going through the aisles. And then reprioritizing, hey, I can't get to this today. Let me just move it to a different day. And that's where planning ahead is really more helpful than doing things last minute. Um, This time management quadrant is really useful if you're struggling with having a lot of things due and you're like, what should I prioritize? So, quadrant one, important, urgent. Important just means it has a big impact on your grade. And then urgent means how soon it's due. So, this quadrant as opposed to important, not urgent, where, it might have a big impact on you, but you don't need to do it by a certain time. So an example is like going to the gym. Like, yes, you should go to the gym, but can you move it to 7 o'clock at night instead of doing it, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Yes. And so that would be something that's not as urgent. Um, Not important urgent would probably mean like those smaller assignments. So, for example, discussion post or maybe reading before class. I'm not saying don't do those things, but also for your grade, it might be only like 1 or 2% of your grade. And so maybe you don't want to spend 3 hours on a discussion post that is only 2% of your grade when you have a test tomorrow, right? So that's an example of being able to prioritize and not just thinking, oh, if it's due tomorrow, then I need to spend like the maximum amount of time on it. And in college, especially, is where you're going to have to learn and it comes with time. But this is a great way to kind of, I just lay everything out there, like what you have to do, and then putting it in these quadrants. So it's like very tangible. Okay, whatever's in quadrant one, I should be working on that first, right? Quadrant four, not important, not urgent. I didn't go over that too much because I'm sure you all know what that means, like scrolling on TikTok or I don't know what else, video games, YouTube. It's not like anything negative or bad, but also, maybe it's not our priority in the moment, especially when we have other things too. Now, I'm not sure if anybody struggles with procrastination, but I would say the students I meet, that's like the number one thing that comes up. I've been talking about it a lot, and so I'm going to continue to talk about it just because it happens even when you're outside of school. So one thing we suggest is, oh, I think I went there. One thing we suggest is Pomodoro. And some of you all may have heard of it, but for those of you who haven't, basically it's just picking a task. So for example, I'm going to write an outline for my paper. And then you set a timer to 25 minutes. For these 25 minutes, I am going to write my paper. And no matter whether I get, a few sentences done, maybe I get half a page done, at the end of those 25 minutes, I know for sure that I will be able to take a break. And so when that timer goes off, you reward yourself with a 5-minute break. And so this is really nice because it's not like this ambiguous, oh, I have to write a page and then I get a break. But what if writing a page, takes me 2 hours? I have no break. And then that's kind of what makes students not want to start. But Pomodoro is nice because I know, okay, I'm gonna have a break in 25 minutes. So I can just do this for 25 minutes and then um, I can, have time to myself. Some students say, oh, Pomodoro doesn't work for me. And usually it's just because of the time. They might say 25 minutes is too long. I can't focus for that long. Or they might say, oh, 25 minutes is too short. I'm super invested in, my problem set and it takes me more time to go away and come back than for me to just continue to work on it. So I just recommend adjusting the time that you're focusing, and it could even vary on what assignment you're doing. But 25 minutes is a suggestion. So if you are taking a shorter amount of time, then just make the break shorter. If you're taking longer than 25 minutes, then maybe give yourself a 10-minute break instead of a 5-minute break. Um, and if you're really, really, really struggling with procrastination, I understand and I recommend just starting with 5 minutes. 5 minutes of, pulling up Blackboard, pulling up your materials, getting your book out, that is still more productive than 5 minutes of scrolling on your phone. And so if you can start with 5 minutes, then you are kind of, I guess, setting yourself up to study even. But once you start getting into whatever task you're doing, you'll find that, oh, the timer goes off. It's been 5 minutes already. I think I can do another five, right? Or I think I can do another 10. And so just starting with five is a great way to at least get started. Um, and you would be surprised how much you can accomplish in 5-minute increments, if you're really not feeling it. So that's like my number one tip for procrastination that even I use when I am hesitant to get started on things. All right. So that was just like general time management. I know that was like a lot of information, but there are all of these things that I'm talking about in the chat. So I just recommend saving them and then feel free at the end. I'll talk about the Core Track Center and how you can meet one-on-one with an academic coach. You can always feel free to come in and discuss any needs related to time management or things like that that I've covered. And we have even more things on our website, which I'll also discuss at the end. But the last portion I wanted to share is on effective study strategies. Just because college is so much different than in high school. I actually used to be a teacher, a middle school teacher, and so I completely understand like how, and also, yeah, just as a student in general, you know, teachers are a lot sometimes nicer in the sense that they'll be like, this is on the test, you need to study this, versus professors they might not have the time. It's not that they don't want to help, but they need to get through all the slides, right, in your basic biology class. And so it's really important to understand how to study on your own, right? Because you don't have as much of a guide necessarily in your professors. So when you have a test, I think just number one, become familiar with the test and what will be covered. And we'll talk about how to do that in like the next slides. But just, you'd be surprised. I meet with students and I'm like, how many questions are on the test? And they don't know. It's okay to ask your professor if they don't mention it because they might think they mentioned it or they just, things get crazy in their lives too that they haven't really talked about it until maybe like, a day or two before. And so just know the format of the test, know what's going to be covered. And that will help you develop your study schedule and plan. And that's kind of more the action plan where you're breaking down, okay, every day I can go over this topic or do this amount of problems, depending on the class. And then the last thing is just use a variety of studying methods with active recall. Um, so, in terms of how do you know what to study, the first thing is just utilizing learning objectives and learning goals. So, sometimes it might be explicitly stated on a slide or on like the slide deck, learning goal, like you will be able to memorize the parts of a cell. And then, oh, hey, that's probably what's going to be on the test. I have to know the parts of the cell. Even though there's 10 different slides showing me cells, I like bare minimum, I need to be able to know the parts of a cell. It could also be on your syllabus. Sometimes professors break down learning goals week by week, and so that's something important to look at. Pay attention to what your professor says and spends time on. This is why going to class is important, right? If the professor's spending, 10 to 15 minutes on one slide, that's probably going to be something that's tested on versus, sometimes professors, they just kind of like flip through their slides and they go through three and they don't really talk about them and then they land on like one after that. Then you can write down, oh, these probably won't be tested, right? If they're not really spending any time on it. Um, Using course material like problem sets and quizzes. So, keeping up with homework is really important, and that can be a great study tool no matter what course you're in, as well as quizzes. So, a lot of times, like quizzes will be on Blackboard, and you might not be able to retake the quiz, but you can see how you did. So, that's a great study material in and of itself. And then lastly, just reaching out to Professor TA if you're super confused or maybe you got sick and you missed class. Professor, or I shouldn't say professors, students sometimes I think are a little bit nervous to talk to professors. And it's more like they respect professors so much that they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I feel like weird asking them questions. They're gonna expect me to know everything. But just remember, these professors are here to help as well as TAs. And if you feel intimidated, you can always write a nice email or ask a classmate to go with you to office hours to kind of ease that I guess nervousness. And then um how you should study. Notes are great, reading is great, but really we're going to talk about active recall. And this is like the last tip I have. And this is super important. So if any of you are especially like pre-med or pre-health or are looking to go to graduate school, I also work with graduate students, and I'd say this is like the number one gap they have when they go to graduate school is just like not understanding the most effective way to study. So I'm going to start with showing a picture of a football player. Um, so even if you don't like sports, you may be into the arts of like theater or dance. So this is all the same concept. When a football player, they have their big game, theater or dance or, singing, you might have your big performance. But what are you doing leading up to that big game or big performance is you're practicing, right? So when you practice, you might be doing drills, right? Like for singing, you do vocal exercises, for football or any other sport, lifting weights. But you're not just doing kind of those side skills to build yourself up, you're actually practicing the actual performance, right? So for sports, you're scrimmaging or practicing, basically a simulation of the game. And for, dance or the arts, you're rehearsing, right? That song or that dance, and you're actually doing what you're going to do on that big day. And so think of studying the same way, right? If a test is multiple choice and you don't have any other information in front of you, um, you want to be practicing that test as well. So what I'm saying is a lot of times students will spend time rewatching lectures, reading, rewriting notes. Yes, those are all good things, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be tested on, oh, what did the professor say in 2 minutes into day, whatever of the lecture. You're going to have a question and you're going to have to answer it. And so that's why active recall is super important. Creating flashcards is a super easy way to do that, right? Have a question, you don't have the answer in front of you, you think about it, you answer it to the best of your ability, you flip it over. Another way is just to teach someone. So if you have a specific topic, okay, well, I'm going to teach you about this. And then even if you miss some things, that's okay because that lets you know, hey, I didn't remember that. That's something that I'm going to need to review next time. If you don't have anybody to teach, you can also just like teach the pretend person, the pretend student next to you. Creating your own questions is also a great way to rethink about the material. And then the last thing I'll say is just practicing that testing environment, right? When we think about like that football player or the dancer, they oftentimes they're rehearsing on that field or the stage that they're going to perform at. And so testing environment could mean like if you have 60 questions in 60 minutes, I'm going to have 1 minute per question. And I'm not saying to do the whole 60 questions in practicing, but maybe you just take 5 questions and you put a timer, you're like, I have to answer 5 questions in 5 minutes. And simulating that testing environment can help with, test anxiety or just feeling nervous the day of because you're like, hey, I've already, put myself in this situation before, so it feels familiar. And that will also better your performance. Now, I recommend practicing the testing environment close to the actual test, so that shouldn't be as much of a, I guess, emphasis until you actually have the content down. But it is something useful, maybe like a day or two before. Um, and then lastly, just like this forgetting curve. So basically, this is my emphasis to not procrastinate and just look at the material right before the test because your memory will go down like if you've only seen it once, right? Or maybe twice because you went to class. Even after a day, the retention will go down a lot. But if you're reviewing even in small bits, 15 minutes a day, um, it'll increase basically like your retention over time. And so even if you're not doing like a 2 hour session the day before, you'll still have that memory from seeing it so many different times, even if it's over the course of a week. Um, so that is kind of it for the, I guess, stress study, time management things. I'm gonna just finish up talking about the Korchak Center, but basically the Korchak Center does everything that I've talked about and more. We work kind of adjacent to OSAS, um, which is the Office of Student Accessibility Services. So they help with the in-class accommodations, extended time, other things the professor can provide. But the Korchak Center, we really want to work with students on, yes, you may have those accommodations, or maybe you don't even receive accommodations, but what can you do as a student to take ownership of your learning and help yourself in all of these areas of like stress management, time management, organization, things like that. And so we offer academic coaching that falls under all of the things that I've shared. And what happens is you're able to meet one-on-one with an academic coach who are graduate students at Rossier or professional staff like myself, and really just share any concerns you have. I have a big test coming up, or maybe it's just like, hey, I just can't focus. Really anything. And from there, we'll work with you in a 25 to 30-minute session during drop-ins. Um, and we also offer workshops as well, which are more general, kind of like what I'm doing right now. It's more presentation style, less individualized on specific topics like time management, reading and writing, stress management, or just preparing for finals. Um, we do have a physical space in Student Union 311, but I know you all might not be doing work necessarily between the hours of 9:30 to 5 because that's when you're going to class. You're just trying to, eat lunch. And so the real studying might happen after the center hours are closed. And so our website is a really great resource for those times where we might not be open or you might not be able to make it there physically or in person. So that's our website on this screen. And if you just click tools and resources at the top, you'll see a bunch of things. So what I shared today is just like a really small sample, but feel free to go on there and just check it out. We also have on-demand workshops, which are short, like YouTube videos explaining different topics as well. Um, and then in person, like I shared, we have drop-in hours and workshops. We also have a quiet study room, so I know the libraries get pretty packed. But you don't need any reservations. You can just come in and we have like different corrals that you can work at. There's not like a time limit. You just sign in and you can come in. We have a creativity corner. We have Rubik's cubes, Legos, what else? Mindful coloring. So if you just need to de-stress or kind of get away, we have that. And then in the creativity corner, students also use it to study, but it's definitely more of like an interactive space where students can feel free to like talk or write things on the whiteboard. They do group study sessions sometimes in there. And then I kind of already discussed the on-demand workshops and tools and resources during the previous slide on our website. But that's kind of the basic gist of what we do. I know we're almost out of time, so I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me speak today. I hope some of the things that I shared was useful. If you have any questions, you can always feel free to put in the chat or contact us at the email on the screen. But yeah, that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much for having me, and I will give back the
Thank you, Nicolette.
yeah.
So we do have a little bit more, but if you do have any questions for Nicolette, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will answer them at the very end. That was a really helpful, I hope that was really helpful going over some actual strategies to use when studying some time management, and also, like Nicolette said, an acknowledgement that if you aren't taking care of yourself and managing your stress, then that's also going to impact your academics. So we wanted to close out with a little bit of tips and some reflection and some goal setting. So these are some tips from fellow students. These are from continuing students that have shared these about how they prepare for midterms and the like. So for preparing for exams, especially for those classes like chem or math or some of those sciences where they have supplemental instruction, SI can be really great for practice problems. And so just as we're talking about, practice the way the test will be. If the test is going to be being given a problem and having to solve it, SI are asking for extra problems or picking homework questions out of the book that maybe weren't assigned can be a really great way to test yourself to see if you can actually answer the things you haven't seen before. Give yourself enough time to understand the material, create a study plan 2 weeks out and gradually study over time. Use flashcards, draw things out, make diagrams as needed, and join study groups. Practice with your classmates. Some other tips about preparing for major projects or papers. So not necessarily exams, but those other bigger assignments. Start with an outline. Make sure you have a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish. Start well in advance. Have a plan. Attempt to work on the assignment consistently so you don't cram. Outline your papers. Do your research Focus on, if it's a research paper, focus on finding good sources. It makes the writing a lot easier if you do the research, if you really research beforehand. Always have someone look over for errors. If you don't have a friend to do that, again, the Writing Center can be really helpful with reviewing your writing. Improving from one exam or assignment to the next, some tips were always ask questions, attend office hours, figure out what's expected for you. Just as they mentioned earlier, if you aren't sure what's going to be tested on an exam or you found yourself surprised by what was on an exam, go clarify in office hours. Visit your professor to see how you could have improved. They may have recommendations. Join student groups, see how other students prepare. I love this one. Don't hyper-focus on the grade you might have received, but instead review what mistakes you might have made and revisit the relevant concepts so you can be prepared for the next time. So a lot of times I think students get caught up in the I just did really bad on this, or I didn't do how I wanted on this, and focus more on the grade than, okay, what have I learned from this? So even from, maybe the not most positive experiences, there are still teaching moments that can be found in there if you focus less on the grade and more what you've learned from that assignment. See what you did wrong. Really review your assignments and see, was it, dumb mistakes? Was it, just a blip of the mind, or did you really not understand the content? Ask for help. And again, don't just look at what the answers are, especially if it's a problem set in your assignment or on your exam. Work your way to that answer. Actually do the problem and see if you can get to the solution rather than just reading, what the answers were. And then last but not least, but so important, tips for finding school life balance. Always keep an agenda, put limits on your phone if you're one of those people who get stuck scrolling like I do. Don't spend every weekend studying, don't spend every weekend partying, but know that finding balance can be really hard and it takes time. So don't be, discouraged if you don't find it right away. Give yourself a break. Don't let constant work drain you. Block out time for socializing and alone time. Just like, you block out time to go to appointments or to go to class, block out time of this is when I'm going to watch Netflix or whatever that may be. Spend some time away from campus, get outside. And again, have that good study schedule so that you can focus on other areas of your life. So those are just a couple tips from fellow students. And what I really encourage you to do over the next couple of days is, to think what study or test taking or time management strategies have worked for you. If you're a continuing student, you were here with us in the fall, what worked in fall? If you're a spring admit, what has worked so far? And if maybe some things haven't worked so well, what are those? Identify the strategies that work for you and the things that maybe haven't worked. If procrastinating until the day before didn't lead to good results, that's probably not something that's going to work well for you in the future. What's new? One new study or time management strategy that you're going to try this semester. So Nicolette just gave you a couple of different ideas. There's lots of handouts in the chat, and we'll send those to you too. But what's something new that you want to try? Even if that's one thing, like I'm going to schedule gym time into my evenings, or I'm going to, go to the writing center once and see what it's like. What is one of those new strategies? And then remember, are you balancing your academics, wellness, social life, and other activities? Check in with yourself regularly. Is there anything you're over or under prioritizing? And one of the things that we really encourage in advising is to always think about SMART goals. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely. And so this is another tool, just like, mapping out your schedule. Set goals for yourself that are realistic. Like by Friday, I will have found 5 sources for my paper using this database. Set goals for yourself that aren't just like, I'm going to study, because that's hard to commit to, right? But break it down into smaller, timely, achievable goals. So that way, not only do you get your work done, but you can also feel really accomplished as you kind of check off these smaller tasks. So with that ends my portion of the presentation as well. Just some of those extra things that as advisors, we want you to know. If you would please fill out our feedback form for this event, so that way we know how to continue to make programming better. For you all, we really would appreciate it. You can scan this QR code, and Ernestina will also put the link in the chat.